You've got $100,000 sitting somewhere. Maybe it's parked in a savings account. Maybe you inherited it. Maybe you sold a property, or you've spent the last decade grinding, saving every spare dollar to get here. Doesn't matter how you got it. What matters is what you do next. Because in Australia right now, that $100,000 can genuinely become $1 million. The only real question is, how fast? And the answer might surprise you, because depending on one decision you make today, the difference could be literally decades of your life. Let's get into it. For most Australians, getting to $100,000 in cash is already a serious achievement. The average full-time salary in this country has now crossed $106,000 before tax. But after tax, after rent or the mortgage, after groceries, after an electricity bill that somehow climbs every quarter, most people are lucky to bank $15,000 to $20,000 a year. That means $100,000 represents somewhere around 5 to 7 years of genuine discipline for the average earner. It's not pocket money. It's years of your actual life compressed into a number on a screen. And what you do with that number from here determines whether those years of sacrifice were worth it. The whole game comes down to one force: compound interest. Your money earns a return, then that return earns its own return, and that return earns another return on top. It starts off slow, almost frustratingly slow, but it builds, and at a certain point the growth becomes so aggressive it feels like it shouldn't be legal. Here's a quick way to picture the speed. It's called the rule of 72. You take 72 and divide it by your annual return. That tells you roughly how many years it takes your money to double. At 10% a year, that's about 7 years to double. So $100,000 becomes $200,000 in around 7 years. Then 200 becomes 400 in another 7. Then 400 becomes 800. And shortly after that, you've crossed the $1 million mark. Here's where most people lose faith though, right at that first doubling. 7 years go by and all you've technically done is add another $100,000. It doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't feel like you're anywhere near $1 million. But that's the trap, because during the second doubling, you're not growing $100,000 anymore, you're growing $200,000. The returns are literally twice as large. During the third doubling, they're 4 times what they were at the start. By the time you're compounding on $400,000 or $500,000, a single decent year in the market can add $50,000 or $60,000 to your balance all on its own. Let's put real numbers behind this using what's actually on the table for Australians right now in August 2026. Your first option is a high-interest savings account. And honestly, the temptation is stronger than it's been in years, because the Reserve Bank has lifted the cash rate 3 times this year to fight inflation, taking it from 3.6% up to 4.35%. The banks followed, and the best ongoing savings rates now sit somewhere between 5.1 and 5.75%, with some introductory offers nudging 6%. Sounds decent. But at 5.5%, your $100,000 takes roughly 43 years to become $1 million. And that's assuming the rate never drops, which it will, because most major banks already expect the next move to be a cut. Then factor in inflation, currently sitting around 3.8%. Your real return, after inflation eats its share, is barely 1.7%. So after 43 years of patience, that $1 million buys you roughly what $200,000 buys you today. Here's the part that really stings though. Over those 43 years, you don't just lose time, you lose the chance to compound at a higher rate every single year along the way. A savings account doesn't just get you there slowly, it actively holds you back from what your money could have been doing somewhere else. After just 10 years, the gap between growing your money at 5.5% versus 10% on $100,000 is close to $90,000. That's nearly another $100,000 left on the table in a single decade. Your second option is the Australian share market. The ASX 200 has averaged around 9.2% a year over the past decade, with dividends reinvested, closer to 10.5% once you factor in franking credits. Let's stay conservative and call it 9%. At 9%, your $100,000 reaches $1 million in about 27 years, with zero extra contributions, no complicated strategy, just a low-cost index fund bought once and left completely alone. That's already 16 years faster than the savings account, purely from choosing a different vehicle. But realistically, you're not going to sit there contributing nothing for 27 years. So let's add some fuel. Invest that $100,000 and chip in $500 a month at 9%, and you hit $1 million in roughly 21 years. $500 a month is genuinely just the takeaway apps, streaming subscriptions, and coffees you don't remember ordering, redirected somewhere that actually builds you wealth. That alone shaves 6 years off the clock. Bump your contributions to $1,000 a month with a 10% average return, and you're looking at around 16 years. Now let's talk about going global. An ASX-listed S&P 500 ETF has delivered somewhere around 15% a year over the past 5 years, more than doubling investors' money in that window. That includes a monster run in US tech, so let's not assume that continues forever. Even at a more conservative 12%, $100,000 reaches $1 million in about 20 years with zero contributions. Add $1,000 a month at that same 12%, and the timeline drops to around 14 years. Push it to $1,500 a month, and the timeline drops to roughly 13 years. At $2,000 a month with 12% returns, you're at $1 million in around 12 years flat. And when you get there, $1 million in investable assets changes your life in ways that go well beyond the number itself. At a conservative 4% withdrawal rate, $1 million generates $40,000 a year in passive income without ever touching the original amount. That's close to $770 a week landing in your account while you sleep. Combine that with even modest work income or a partial pension, and you've got genuine financial freedom. Not flashy, no sports cars, just the freedom to work because you want to, not because you have to. The freedom to take 3 months off and know nothing falls apart. The freedom where a surprise bill doesn't send you into a spiral. And here's the part almost nobody talks about. The second million comes drastically faster than the first. At 10% returns on $1 million, your money alone is generating $100,000 a year in growth. The game doesn't slow down after $1 million, it accelerates. That's exactly why speed matters so much in the early years. Every year you shave off the journey to your first $1 million is a year you gain on the far more powerful compounding that kicks in after it. Think about what that actually means. Same $100,000, but the difference between parking it in a savings account and actively investing it with consistent monthly contributions is more than 30 years, 3 decades, an entire generation of time, gained or lost, depending on the choice you make. This is where most people trip up. They don't start. They look at the share market and decide it's too complicated. They hear about a crash on the news and convince themselves they need to wait for the perfect moment. They tell themselves they'll sort it out next year. But every year you delay has a real cost, and it's not just one lost year of returns. It's one lost year of compounding stacked on top of every single year that follows it. The actual mechanics of doing this are simple. You open a brokerage account, you pick a low-cost index ETF, something like an ASX 200 fund gives you the top 300 Australian companies for around 7 basis points a year in fees, while a global developed markets fund gives you exposure to well over 1,000 companies worldwide for under 20 basis points. You set up a recurring investment, so money moves automatically every month, and then, this is the hard part, you do nothing. You don't touch it when the market drops. You don't try to get clever and time a dip. You don't sell because someone on social media reckons a recession's coming. You just let time and compounding do what they've been doing for over a century of market history. So, here's the honest answer. $100,000 can become $1 million in as few as 12 years, or as many as 43. The speed comes down to exactly 2 things: where you put the money and how much you keep adding. Same starting point, wildly different outcomes, and the choice entirely is yours. If you got something out of this, do me a favor. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you there.